Hold on. Hello, my liberty lovers, and welcome to Latin Libertarians. I am your host, Martha Bueno, with the lovely Zach Foster. Hi, Zach. How are you today?
I've got the death system on 10 systems. How are you?
I am fantastic. Today is a show that I absolutely am looking forward to, and I love this subject because we're going to talk about us. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
we're going to talk about a subject that we love. We do love doing things for freedom, and especially with the country that is near and dear to both of our hearts, Venezuela. So I, as a lot of people know, I'm Cuban, but I lived in Venezuela for many years. And Zach, why do you love Venezuela so much?
It's more like I love Venezuelans. I've never been to Venezuela before. I'm Mexican American, so I speak Spanish. That's how I was able to have a dialogue going with Venezuelans. But I'm in this because of them, the people.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I do too. I love Venezuelans and Cubans, of course, and people who like liberty. And we have a lot of people in Venezuela who would love to have some liberty. So, Zach, you have an organization that does some really incredible work. So, can you give us a little something about what you guys do?
Well, it's not necessarily that I have an organization as much as I'm part of an organization. I happen to be there when it was founded. It's called the Citizens Embassy of Venezuela, and it is primarily composed of Venezuelan volunteers. There are a few American volunteers, or excuse me, American homegrown volunteers. And we provide humanitarian services in the form of getting involved in the cases of ICE detainees. These are people who we investigate, we vet them. These are bona fide refugees, and they also happen to be trapped in the nightmare of America's immigration system. And the migratory system is quite brutal. I understand why it exists. I understand the reasons, but nonetheless, it is very brutal for human beings. So let me tell you guys what happens usually. When an illegal immigrant gets picked up by ICE, usually the embassy of their country in the United States gets notified, hey, we have your citizen so-and-so. And then either the embassy will confirm, oh, he's supposed to be here for work, or he's supposed to be here on this or that visa, or for this or that reason, or they just do the paperwork with ICE to get that person repatriated back home. When this project started, the United States had no kind of diplomatic relations with Venezuela. Well, I mean, with Juan Guaido's people, but as far as the people controlling the territory, our government had no relations with them. So they had no embassy over here anymore. Remember, there was that big stink about the occupation of the embassy in Washington, D.C. by American communists. And then the Secret Service went and kicked them out, and the Venezuelans had basically besieged the place for several weeks so that the commies couldn't, keep restocking on food and whatnot to continue invading foreign soil. But their embassy was not doing anything for them. And one of the themes of this program is going to be how absolutely useless Juan Guaido is as a leader, as a politician, as a human being. But because the embassy was not doing anything for him, and we recognized, this group of people recognized these people had needs and they needed help now, because these bona fide victims of communism, survivors of violence from a communist regime, they were facing deportation. They were going to get sent back if nobody stepped up for them. And as much as we have laws and we have a migratory process and court dates and whatnot that every illegal alien is entitled to go to, it's under US law. ICE plays a lot of games. They play a lot of games with paperwork. They play a lot of games with people's legal status. They play a lot of games with moving detainees around from one place to another, so it's very difficult to track them. They play a lot of games, and there were folks who were facing deportation without even having had their first hearing with a judge, which every immigrant is entitled to, and it was absolutely insane. So the Citizens
So tell us
Embassy
what
got
exactly
involved.
the citizen, yeah, what exactly does the citizen embassy do? So how can other people get involved? Is this something that you have a special skill to do, or can anyone help?
Oh, anybody can help, and the folks who are involved with this come from all walks of life. We've got engineers, we've got blue collar workers, we've got people who used to be very high profile lawyers in Venezuela who today they're doing DoorDash because immigrant struggles. You got to survive, got to pay the bills. So all kinds of folks get involved in that. There are certain skills that you will learn. I mean, we have learned a lot of what the actual migratory process is. We learned what the paperwork is that different immigrants are going to have to do in different situations. For example, the overwhelming majority of people who arrive in this country are going to end up filling out a form I-589 with USCIS, and the 589 is the asylum form. So that's just an example of the technical stuff. When this project started, I had no problem. I had no idea of any of this. I didn't know anything about 589s or 60-001s, nothing. And as far as the people commenting for they would like to help, actually, really glad that you guys said that, because right now, the Hispanic Libertarian Caucus is kind of unofficially recruiting people who can do volunteer work for different organizations, including the Citizens Embassy. So this is a really cool example of volunteerism. I mean, the work that they're supposed to be doing is the work that a government is supposed to be doing, and here is just people. They're not claiming authority over anybody's lives. They just realize that people need help, and the folks who are stealing our taxes or stealing their taxes were not doing their jobs, so they just started doing it. And with the actual work of the Citizens Embassy, it's real 50-50. A lot of it is consular work or para-consular work. A lot of people commonly call it the para-embassy because they do what an embassy would do, but it's not a real embassy. So about 50% of it is going to be talking on the phone with detainees. That's going to be for the Spanish speakers, but for folks who don't speak Spanish, that's totally fine, because all the time we need help filling out forms for people. I mean, we need scribes. I cannot be sitting down and physically filling forms out for everybody. I just don't have the time to do that. I've got other projects to direct too. There's other fun ways to collaborate. For example, just a couple of weeks ago, there was a particular detainee who had gotten injured inside the prison, and they had to operate on his foot. And just a couple of days after a surgery, because he went and made a stink about it, and like his immigrant mom called a congressman, and there was a news report about it. They processed him
And
out
Zach
very
got him
speedily.
on the news. Yeah,
No, I
he's
did not
very
get
modest.
him. I did not get him on the news. My friend Edinson got him on the news. That kid got me on the news.
There you
But it was
go.
in a good context. It was not like an 11 o'clock news context. No, it was coverage of good humanitarian work. But this kid was released from the prison. Now his mother, who he had not seen in 3 years, because communism does that. People have to leave the country. You got to go to whatever country you can to try to find work to send money back to your family, and then more people end up having to leave because hyperinflation. Most people, what they're getting paid, it used to be the equivalent of a couple of $100s a month. But because of hyperinflation, today it's the equivalent of less than $2 a month. It's just not enough to live by. So communism separates people. This kid had not seen his mom in 3 years. He came over here. He got detained by ICE. So we helped him out with the process. And then there were also lawyers who were helping out pro bono, which, by the way, if any of you is an attorney that specializes in immigration law or any other type of law, and you'd like to take on some pro bono clients every once in a while, there's a lot of work that we can do, because it's not just about getting these people out of ICE prison. It's not just about making sure that people physically cross the Mexico border and stay alive. It is about what's next. Can you help somebody get work? Can you help somebody get some freaking clothes? Because usually whatever they come, they arrive in this country with, the clothes on their back, that's it. That's what they got. End of story. So this kid got released. His mother had resettled in San Francisco. That's where she ended up in the diaspora. His ICE prison was in Louisiana. When he got released, they walked him to the front door of the prison. They took away his crutches because they were government property, and they said, good luck. And this kid was absolutely screwed. So luckily, the clerk at the front desk let him use the prison's phone to make some phone calls. This kid called his mom, and his mom asked for help. She came to Edinson, who he runs a campaign called Una Carta Salva Una Vida, which means a letter saves a life. So we would help people filling out forms, whereas those guys would write directly to ICE officers, and we ended up doing the same thing too. Edinson calls me and says, hey, we need help with a lot of things, all right? This kid just got out of prison. He's got nothing but the clothes on his back. He's not mobile because he's only a couple of days post-op. So this guy is, first, he's going to need a wheelchair or at least some crutches. He's going to need a hotel room. He's going to need food, and he's going to need a plane ticket. And I'm just going to go ahead and give some credit where credit is due. We'll take away crutches. Sounds like that is correct, Daniel. And that is absolutely what they did. They took away the crutches.
That is a Harry Brown quote, right? It's sort of in there at the same time. Yep. Government will break your legs and then
so,
give you crutches. But.
Beautiful example of voluntarism. I participated in the Twilight Bark. Remember in 101 Dalmatians, the Twilight Bark, all the dogs start barking, and then the bark carries on for miles and miles and miles, and the message gets out. So that's what we did. We did the human version of the Twilight Bark. Edinson called me. I called Martha, and I was like, hey, do you have any idea how we could possibly resolve this? Bleh, my mind is on the blank. And she said, oh, you know what? I've got some airline miles cashed up that I haven't used yet, and I don't know when I'm going to use them. Let me use these airline miles and see if we can cut down the cost for this kid's ticket. So they cut the cost of the ticket. Well, because of Martha used her miles, it cut the cost of the ticket from $650 to $5. Not a very difficult expense. Thank you very much, Martha, for coming through on that. And we were able to get this kid home. And I repeat, he is a victim of communism like his mother. He had not seen his mother in 3 years. They were reunited in this country. This kid's working. They got a lawyer. They sold a bunch of their crap to be able to get a lawyer and to also pay the bond to get him out of the ICE prison.
And you have to tell people why that is, Zach. You have to tell people why that is. Hold on. Because, see, you like to tell the story, but you miss out on the key parts here. Why is it that they had to sell their car and their stuff? And what was that money for?
First, there was a bond. So it's not just a matter of an immigration judge says, all right, congratulations, Juan Guaido, you're approved, you get to stay in this country. They still, because they were here illegally, that landed them in the big house. It's a migratory big house, but it's the big house. So they got to pay to get out of the big house. So
and what is the usual amount?
5 to 15,000, usually 10,000.
There you go. I just want to emphasize this point.
So, and a lot of people,
such a cruelty of this country.
Yeah, a lot of people don't get to leave ICE prison because their family doesn't have thousands and thousands of dollars. So usually, what ends up happening is,
what if you don't have
or they have
somebody?
nobody. Yeah, they got absolutely nobody. So, in those cases, those poor SOBs, if they won their case, they'll usually end up staying inside a detention center for 1 or 2 years, in some cases 4 years, until somebody in Homeland Security finally does the paperwork to give them an administrative release without the bond. But yeah, Uncle Sam absolutely does shake people down when they get here. So a lot of people ask, well, they like to come here and they like to abuse the welfare system and blah, 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 blah. Good luck abusing the welfare system if you don't have an ID, if you don't have a social security number. Good luck. Also, a lot of these folks, they got to pay to get out of ICE detention. Like, they have to pay. They have to pay for the privilege of freedom. So most folks who end up here, if they ended up here legally, they paid thousands of dollars for a visa to be here. And if they ended up here illegally and they're still here, that means they paid many thousands of dollars to get out of ICE detention in most cases. And it
I just
is
want to
absolutely
do a quick
insane.
shout out. I'm sorry to interrupt you there, Zach, but we just got a message from Lauren Postler from People for Liberty, and she very kindly offered to help us out with an email that anybody who would like to volunteer, you can go ahead and just send a quick email to volunteers@people, the number 4 Liberty, and they'll help us because we really are overwhelmed with work. So I want to say thank you to Lauren for helping us with this project. And I just put it there, and Lauren just put it up as well. So People for Liberty has been very helpful to all of these missions. And I just want to say thank you for helping us get some volunteers and be able to direct people to what we need. Because there's a lot of places where people can volunteer in this mission. Zach, I want to move on to what we're currently doing, because we have a mission that right now libertarians can get involved. I feel like I'm selling something. I feel like this is like, but wait, there's more. So we are currently working on an initiative that is exactly what libertarians talk about all the time. And that is how we can get involved without the government getting involved, without it being a government thing, how we can change something. So there's a situation in Venezuela going on right now, and we'll explain the rest. We'll come back to all the reasons behind it. But for now, before people head off, because I see our numbers coming and going, I'd really like to get to this point, Zach. So what is it that we're doing? What is this mission we're doing? And why is it so awesome for libertarians?
Okay, let me preface this with one quick phrase. While the U.S. government has recognized Juan Guaido as the president of Venezuela, and while hundreds of thousands of Venezuelan people are starving to death every year, and by the end of this year, another 100,000 Venezuelans will have died. While all that's happening, Juan Guaido's family has been skiing in the Austrian Alps. They've been visiting Paris. They bought themselves luxury apartments in Miami, where a lot of them have been living in comfort. They don't work real jobs. Most of them have no work, no show jobs. They make huge salaries. And guess what, folks? All of y'all and I are paying for this. We'll get there in a minute. Now, Martha asked what the project is. The project is Phone Calls for Freedom. So it turns out that the U.S. has spent over $1 billion helping the Venezuelan people be free. And I got to say, folks, the exact opposite result has happened. I say again, the United States government has sent over $1 billion of U.S. taxpayer money to Venezuela. That's our money. And these people are not even doing what they're supposed to be doing with it. So we'll get into it in just a moment. Juan Guaido is false opposition. The whole world recognized him as the interim government. Under Hugo Chavez's constitution, he actually was the president under constitutional succession. But none of that matters because he had a very specific job under the constitution of his country to get his people to freedom and then guarantee the conditions for a free election. And he had a very short time to do so. Instead, he was busy spending our money, your money, my money. And he was selling his people out to the communists. And since he became interim president of Venezuela, another 150 or 200,000 Venezuelans died. As a result of communism, he had the power to stop it. So he has been false opposition. The whole plot that the false opposition has been working on for 2.5 years has been to put up a good show of a fight, but not really do anything to kick the communists out of power. That's another thing we'll get into later. But the most important thing is he abandoned his people to communism. His interim government has received over $1 billion, and we are paying for this garbage. We are paying these people not to do their job and to sell their people out to communism. The latest BS project that they're doing is called the National Salvation Agreement. Now, the National Salvation Agreement, it's basically the admission of, well, you know, we tried to fight against the regime, but it didn't work. So we have no choice but to negotiate with them and then go to elections and see who the Venezuelan people are really going to support in an election. And it's not even like they're going to do all new elections for their government this year. They're going to stick to the same electoral schedule. Later this year, there's going to be governor elections. And then it's going to be more than 2 years until the presidential election. And then whoever wins the presidential election, then he gets to decide policy. So let me
But it's only
decode that.
between those
You
two,
and
right?
I, yeah, it's just between the regime and the false opposition. But you and I are financing this process, all right? The number one financer of the interim Venezuelan government is the U.S. government. Our ambassador, James Story,
Oh,
to
wait,
Venezuela
there's
seems to
more.
think, yes, there is more, and I'll get there in just a minute. Our ambassador, James Story, seems to really think that if we keep giving them money, they are going to keep fighting for democracy, and Venezuela is going to somehow be magically free when, sorry, folks, the National Salvation Agreement means that these people are going to go to elections with the same people that stole the last 7 elections, because that's what communists do. That's why they say you can vote your way into socialism, but you have to shoot your way out. And these people cannot shoot their way out because Hugo Chavez took all the guns away 9 years ago. Now, please keep
This is
focused
correct.
on
What
that,
I
all
was going to
right?
say, but wait, there's more. Huh? The part of what, but wait, there's more.
Just
Only 2%
because
of this cash
I
that
feel
we
it.
send.
I feel a disturbance in the force. I feel a disturbance in the force, and all these people are saying, "Why are we even talking about Venezuela?" Because we are paying for the false opposition to help the communists stay in power. I have a problem with that. Now, go ahead. Wait, there's more. 2% of
Wait,
what?
there's more. So first of all, going back to what you just said, as somebody whose family fled communism twice now out of Cuba, and then we did live in Venezuela and leave there. We did leave right before the situation got bad, but we did have to leave because of the situation. So this is twice now that my family has had to pick up and move somewhere else. And now I pay tax dollars to the system, which I know we're libertarians. We don't have to argue. We all agree taxes are bad. But my tax dollars and your tax dollars and Zach, your tax dollars and everybody's tax dollars are going to fund a communist system. And that to me is the ultimate slap in the face. That to me is, we care so little about your experience and everybody else who's ever come to this country fleeing communism. Now we're going to support it because we're American. We can. But anyways, and 2% of the money that we send gets.
Sorry? Can you bring up that page from that report?
The 2 million?
Yeah. Now, while Martha's bringing up the page from a report, what she says is true. This is from a U.S. aid report. This is a U.S. government report. They investigated the foreign aid going to Venezuela between 2017 and 2019, and they found, yes, really, only 2% of the aid meant for Venezuela actually went to any Venezuelans. Now, what we're looking at on the screen is a screenshot of a report published by the U.S. Congressional Research Service from the year 2006. In the year 2006, U.S. taxpayers sent $2 million to Hugo Chavez to help him do anti-drug missions, which that's hilarious right there, because Hugo Chavez, because he hates us, he doesn't have any real beef against us. The Castro regime kind of does if we go all the way back to the 1960s. But Hugo Chavez's religion, his political religion, is Marxism-Leninism, and it's specifically the Fidel Castro doctrine. Because this was Hugo Chavez's religion, he hated us from the very beginning. He really was out to try to get us. So he let the FARC and the ELN, which are Marxist guerrilla groups from Colombia, but they sustain themselves through drug trafficking because the war on drugs is failure and it creates more demand instead of eliminating it. These communist terrorists support themselves on drugs. Hugo Chavez literally gave them safe havens inside the Venezuelan border so that they could continue to do their revolution. Because again, Fidel Castroism is his religion. These guys are doing the Fidel Castro guerrilla warfare thing. So Hugo Chavez not only stuck us a blow in the war on drugs, like he specifically wanted to facilitate more drugs going to the United States, and he wanted those drugs to be toxic. He wanted to create more addicts. He wanted people to OD. All right. Now, the war on drugs is the murder weapon. All right. Hugo Chavez is not the murder weapon. Our policy is the murder weapon. However, that guy is still the guy who picked up the weapon. He let the FARC and the ELN into his country. So anyway, 15 years later, Venezuela is a drug cartel. Maduro's government is quite literally a drug cartel. That's not just U.S. government propaganda. It is a mafia, everything to local godfathers. factional disputes between communists, everything. It is a drug cartel, all right? So for Venezuela to be a drug cartel, we have been sending that government, you and I, us, the taxpayers, we've been sending them millions of dollars every year for counter drug efforts. On top of that, we've been sending another $2.2 million, and that was 2006. So the same report, $2 million for anti-drug BS for Hugo Chavez, $2.2 million to help support democracy in Venezuela, because even back then they were having problems with the ruling party having a hyper-authoritarian tendency, and they started to steal elections. So this country has become a totalitarian dictatorship. This country has become a drug cartel. We have been paying for it, all right? Ultimately, and the blame still is with those guys. Those particular people are the criminals doing this to their people. But we, as taxpayers, made it easier for them. And as somebody who's dealt with the human fallout of the Venezuela crisis, that is a problem. That's a report between 2017 and the end of 2019, so the year of Juan Guaido. We sent over $650 million to Venezuela. Now, 400 million of that was supposed to be destined to humanitarian aid, so NGOs in Venezuela, or Venezuelan NGOs and other NGOs in Colombia. And then another 180, 190 million was for the opposition parties to, quote unquote, protect democracy. So these are the people who have been fake opposition the entire time. Every time millions of Venezuelans come out into the streets and they gather in front of the presidential palace and they gather in front of other governmental buildings and they start surrounding soldiers and surrounding police and doing citizens arrests on the army and police, every time the Venezuelan masses have come out to the streets to get rid of this oppressive government, it has been the Venezuelan opposition leaders that tell them they go on TV immediately and they say, no, 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 don't do it. Not like this. Go back home. Let's not have any violence whatsoever. We're going to get them in the next election. We're going to get them in the next election. Now, you guys are tired of hearing Democrat and Republican politicians say that crap. Oh, we're going to get them in the next election. Imagine watching your country become a dictatorship and then people telling you, oh, we're going to get them in the next election. So now we get to the National Salvation Agreement. This false opposition, their whole job was to be false opposition, protect the communist regime from international sanctions, protect the communist regime from other governments offering their aid. Because I'm going to tell you guys right now, multiple governments offered Guaido special assistance to get rid of the communists. As far as I know, the U.S. was not one of them. There was pissing contests going on between Trump and his people in the NSA and people in the Pentagon and the CIA and the State Department. So that was its own pentagram of bureaucratic pissing contests. But Brazil, for example, they did make a hard offer. As a matter of fact, I know a guy who was in the room when that happened. He is a Venezuelan by the name of Eduardo Bitar. He is the leader of an organization called Rumbo Libertad, which means the path to freedom. They have about 50,000 followers on social media. These guys, they are the Venezuelan right wing. Like those 50,000 people, that is the Venezuelan right wing. Because after the 2002 coup, Hugo Chavez systematically eliminated the right wing in Venezuela and dragged all political parties to the left. For example, Juan Guaido has gotten a rap in the media as being right wing. He's not right wing. His party is a member party of the Socialist International. They simply happen to be slightly to the right of Marxist-Leninists. That's why they're right wing. Anyway, so yeah, socialism is not going to remove socialism.
No. What
false opposition? Socialism? Oh my God! Like
do we have an
these
answer
people
to this?
piss me off so hard. Anyway, I got involved with the Venezuelans back in the summer of 2017. Early in 2017, I had been made aware of a problem that was going on in Cuba. Turns out that there were libertarians, I would even say Misesian libertarians, organically in Havana. Some of the guys got arrested with having the wrong book. They got sent to the gulag. Then one of the members of that group, Mises Cuba Book Club, made it to Miami as a refugee. He still didn't speak Spanish. He still didn't speak English. He only spoke Spanish. He found me on Facebook posting in a Spanish language libertarian group, asked me for help. I investigated. Turns out, yes, the Cuban regime really did arrest libertarians in their own country for having the wrong books. They weren't asking for any money. They wanted press. They said, please put this in the news. And I said, all right, yeah, sure, I'll put this in the news. But I mean, what's that actually going to do? And he was telling me these people don't care about human rights, but PR, press, good press is everything to these people. Bad press is even greater anathema to the Castro regime than shooting its soldiers with an AK-47.
I don't have the Cuban libertarians, but these guys are Venezuelan libertarians. And so
a couple of months after, yeah, thank you for showing that picture. These guys, this is the Libertarian Movement of Venezuela. That is the name of their organization. I got involved with them a couple of months after I met the Cuban libertarians, because the more I was learning about what the Cuban government was doing to its own people, who were now asking me for help with, helping them not get killed by a communist regime, I found out about what the Cuban regime was doing in other countries. Now, nothing is ever going to excuse the crimes of the CIA in other countries, not in Latin America, not in Iran, especially not the garbage that they supported in Indonesia. That said, many of my fellow American libertarians get CIA tunnel vision. They start talking about Snowden. They start talking about Chelsea Manning. I understand all of that stuff still happened. There is no erasing that stuff. However, I ask you, please don't get CIA tunnel vision. Think of it this way. We are living in a Game of Thrones type of world where there are multiple crappy, hyper-aggressive kingdoms all trying to conquer each other and all competing for hegemony, all right? That's how the world is with intelligence agencies. And remember, all right, remember the stories of Yuri Maltsev. Remember Eugen Richter's Pictures of the Socialistic Future. Remember that even though it was the Nazis that made Mises and Hayek flee Austria, the Soviet Union still put a hit out on Mises for writing the treatise on socialism, all right? Like, a lot of these folks are absolutely insane. So the Cuban government has conquered Venezuela and Nicaragua. Those two countries are colonies. What do I mean when I say colonies? I mean, if you go back and reread that book by John Perkins, Confessions of an Economic Hitman, and it talks about all the ways that the US government has used private corporations and civil organizations to slowly take over countries, Cuba's done that too. For example, this is a photo from 2017. In one particular protest in the state of Merida, people surrounded a particular police officer who was in full uniform, riot gear, and all that stuff, and they did a citizen's arrest on him. The guy was Cuban. He had a Cuban ID. Furthermore, it was a Cuban ID that had just been renewed a couple months before this incident, which means the guy knew he was going to be deployed to Venezuela, so he got his ID renewed, and then he went to go fight in Venezuela for his country. And he was one of just 45,000 Cuban soldiers who were in that country wearing Venezuelan uniforms. Why? Because the communists learned from our PR disasters in Iraq and Afghanistan. Think of all the photos of Abu Ghraib, all right? As a matter of fact, if you guys watch news about the UN, next time the Cubans shout and throw another anti-US, anti-imperialism tantrum the way they like to do, watch. They're going to show photos of the Abu Ghraib tortures because they love playing that CD, all right? It's one of their greatest hits. So they learned. Instead of having Cubans in Cuban uniforms in Venezuela, they got Cubans in Venezuelan uniforms. And the ones that more frequently interact with the people, because they do a lot of crowd control when they're not off like hunting dissidents in their houses at 3 a.m, they get trained with how to speak in the Venezuelan dialect. And there's a wonderful report that you guys can read. It's called Cubazuela. It was published by the Foundation for Human Rights in Cuba. It's something like 200 pages or something like that. And it's got photo evidence. It's got names. It's got unit designations. It's got maps of where some of these different units are located. There really, honest to goodness, are more than 40,000 Cuban troops doing to Venezuela what our government has been doing to Iraq and Afghanistan. Now, the suffering of those people in Iraq and Afghanistan, that is the fault of our government. There is no taking that back. What I'm using, though, I'm using that to illustrate everything that you guys have been protesting against that our government has been doing. Another government has been doing those things to my friends, Venezuelan libertarians, all right? My friends, people that I know personally, people that I have met in person, some of them. I've even dated a couple of Venezuelan libertarian gals, all right? These people and their struggles are absolutely real to me. Now, I was mentioning Juan Guaido's false opposition. We're looking at video from the April 30th, 2019 uprising. This was one of the best crafted shows that the Venezuelan opposition has done, and they all deserve Academy Awards for this. Long story short, at the beginning of that day, Juan Guaido went out in front of a military base in a particular neighborhood in Caracas. He did a live Periscope stream with a group of soldiers behind him. The group of soldiers behind him really had defected from the regime. However, he told the people, come out to the streets. Today we get our freedom. The armed forces has switched sides. So he told his people, the armed forces has switched sides, come out into the streets. The armed forces had not switched sides. And what we are looking at is a video of protesters on the Francisco Fajardo Bridge over Highway 9 in Caracas, I believe, getting shot at with gas canisters and buckshot by the communist military because Juan Guaido lied. And remember, I told you guys earlier, the whole point of the Venezuelan opposition was to kind of put up the show of a fight, but not really do anything to dislodge these people from power. Get some people killed in the process, make it really dramatic. And then at the very end, their plan was always going to be to say, well, you know, we tried, it didn't work. Now we have no choice but to negotiate and go to elections with the communists. The first time I heard this, I thought it was a conspiracy theory because my friend Eduardo told this to me more than 2 years ago, back when I still believed that Juan Guaido, yeah, he's a crappy democratic socialist, but at least, you know, he might really be trying. Vitar told me, no, I guarantee you they're going to play this game for 2 years. Then they're going to say, sorry, we failed. Now we got to go to elections with the communists. What we're looking at here, these are the walkers, all right? Every day, tens of thousands of people stream out of Venezuela on foot. They don't have cars anymore, or they can't get gas because there's just no gas anymore. Even before the U.S. sanctions on the state oil company took effect 2 years ago, according to Venezuelan bank reports from the central bank, their government bank, their government had already wrecked the oil production by more than 90% since Hugo Chavez went into office. So oil-producing country, they're not making oil. These people are
they're
too
not
poor
just
to
an
afford
oil-producing
anything.
country. Little asterisk.
They're having to walk.
They're not just an oil-producing country. They are the country with the largest proven oil reserves in the entire world. You know how everybody looks at the Middle East and you're like, wow, how can they live like that? Because they have so much money. Venezuela should be like that. They have more money, more oil, than all of these other countries. So this is just a matter. It's not even close.
It's not even that we've gotten to the failures of central planning. In some cases, yes, central planning in Venezuela failed. They didn't even get to test out whether central planning would succeed or fail because the communists, they just stole the money right out of the government coffers. They just stole it. They stole it. They took it.
To be fair, this has been happening
and we've been
forever.
And we've been sending them. And then you and I have been sending them millions of dollars every year to quote unquote fight drugs. And for that false opposition to quote unquote protect democracy. They haven't been protecting democracy. They've been using yours and my tax money to get hotel rooms, to go to nightclubs, to do cocaine, really good cocaine, and they've been spending it to hire sex workers. This is not exaggerations. Juan Guaido's people and the communists, just like the communists, both sides, have all stolen their country's money plus the aid money that yours and my tax dollars sent down to them so that they could buy themselves cocaine and sex workers. Well, I mean, I'm glad that they know what they like, but they should not have stolen that money. And we especially should not have been financing it. All right. I have paid to bury Venezuelans who did not survive this crisis. You understand? That's how involved I am in that. All right. That's how many friends I have down there. I have paid multiple times to bury people who did not survive this crisis. And the whole time, Juan Guaido's family is skiing in the Austrian Alps. And Juan Guaido is running around with his supermodel wife. And now there's Juan Guaido's puppet master, whose name is Leopoldo Lopez. He's been running around with his wife, staying in fancy capitals of Europe. And you and I have been paying for this, all right? All that money that they're spending, that is coming from us, or it's coming from money laundering in certain cases.
Or it's also coming from the money they steal from Venezuela. Venezuela is one of the richest countries in natural resources in Latin America. And
Can we
they,
go to well, real quick, let's show the picture of Kyle, because I'm not done talking about the walkers real quick. So tens of thousands of people, because they are so poor, they have to leave the country, but they don't have a car, they can't even buy a bus ticket, so they just walk. They walk to the Colombia-Venezuela border, hundreds of miles in many cases, and there's a city there on the border called Cucuta. And our friend Kyle Varner, who's a lifetime member of this party, he also has been with me in this struggle. All right, as individuals, as volunteers, we have done everything that we possibly could to help libertarians in their peaceful struggle for freedom. But also, once the humanitarian crisis started, once people started coming down with medieval diseases and getting hospitalized, once people started going 3, 4, 5 days without food, and they had to eat their pride and ask us for help so that they could buy food, we got distracted from just doing libertarian politics. Now, Kyle is a medical doctor. He went down to volunteer with an NGO, an American NGO, that set up a field hospital in the city of Cucuta, right there on the border of Venezuela. He even paid to bus several members of the libertarian movement of Venezuela to come to the border and work with him as volunteers. So they were helping their own countrymen in this field hospital. Kyle Varner was helping give people life. The time that Kyle Varner spent at that field hospital, he took care of some very sick people and he saved a lot of lives. And unfortunately, there were also some people that he was not able to save. He did lose some patients. And our friend Kyle Varner has also paid to bury people who did not survive the Venezuela crisis. These are reasons not only why I fully believe that the Venezuelan people have every right to overthrow Nicolas Maduro. I don't give a damn about what any of our audience members wants to flap their gums about a coup. I don't care. That government has killed 500,000 of its own people, all right? That was not our CIA. That was one of the few China shops that our bull didn't break. Iraq, okay. Afghanistan, more the Russians, but okay, we didn't make it any better. Yemen, absolutely, we put fuel on that fire. Libya, yeah, we did that. Somalia, Central Africa, all right, yeah, we can take the blame for that. But our government didn't break Venezuela. And for Juan Guaido to have let that continue is the ultimate. That I don't know. I don't even have what's a good reference. Juan Guaido has been the mother who knows that her husband is abusing the children in a very terrible way, and she allows him to continue because she doesn't want to get divorced and lose her standard of living. That is Juan Guaido, and we are paying for this. This is a photo of some of our wonderful folks in the libertarian movement protesting in the streets of their city. I believe this is the city of Maracay. Is there a charity that helps Venezuelans on the border? Yes, David. The one that Dr. Varner volunteered with is called Med Global. I say again, Med Global. They do help people right there on the border. All right, let's move on.
Well, we were supposed to talk about what we were doing for this to help.
We'll talk about that in a minute. First, though, before we get there, there's a couple of photos of specific libertarians. We've got to talk about these people and their heroism and what they suffered. We have to talk about them. And then I will tell everybody what they can do to help us tonight. Okay, yes, so because you guys can do something to help us tonight. We're going to tell you. Just stay with me, all right? There's a method to my madness. This angel of mercy, her name is Melanie Manjud. She is a small L Venezuelan libertarian. So the capital L libertarians, they join an organization called the Libertarian Movement. But as far as political parties in Venezuela go, before the regime went and took over all of the opposition parties, there's been a political party in Venezuela called Vente Venezuela, which means come on Venezuela. Those guys are the closest to a libertarian-ish party that Venezuela has. If the Republican Liberty Caucus, with its paleo-libertarian philosophy, was its own independent political party, separate from the GOP, that would be Venta Venezuela. So she is an activist from that party. She runs her own wonderful little NGO inside the country where they fundraise from different Venezuelans from abroad, and then they'll make a trip to Colombia, and they'll buy a bunch of medical supplies, and then they'll bring them back to the children's hospitals in Venezuela. So this Angel of Mercy will go to the oncology ward with a bunch of the medications that these kids need to stay alive. And if there's a budget for it, they'll bring cakes and treats or toys for the kids, which is a huge luxury because it's a freaking communist country. Not only are the hospitals absolute garbage and dilapidated, but a lot of times they're 6 to 12 hours without electricity. Imagine being a child with cancer in those conditions. So that's what she does. Now, back in February, when there was that big power struggle, February 2019, there was the big power struggle between Juan Guaido and Maduro. They had the humanitarian aid convoys that were going across the Venezuelan border. Richard Branson had the big Live Aid concert, and a bunch of people thought that they were really going to dislodge a communist regime with a rock concert. It was during that weekend. Melanie was not involved in any of that. She was in Caracas, and she was doing the volunteer work that she usually does. So they'd gotten some medication from abroad, and they went to a hospital, and they were in the hospital distributing when the National Guard showed up. So the military showed up, and they arrested this girl because she was participating in a coup against the regime, all right? She never even went out to the streets to protest and say, Maduro leave or anything like that. Her supposed helping to overthrow the regime in a coup was delivering medication to this hospital because she gave those children and those people a different avenue to get medication than voting for the regime. All right. Venezuela has a national ID card. The way that you vote is registered. Your vote is not anonymous. The government knows how you voted. If you did not vote correctly, you do not get your monthly food subsidy. You do not get health care. Literally, they will just erase your doctor's appointment from the system. All right, that's how that communist regime keeps control. And they arrested her. This is Jesus Noria. On the April 30th uprising, so when Juan Guaido lied and he told everybody, come out to the streets, the military has switched side, our libertarian brother, Jesus Noria, was one of the many people, the millions of people that day who went out into the streets. He jumped on top of a car in the town square. He was wearing his porcupine t-shirt, and he was making a speech about, don't be scared if they're shooting at us, my brothers. We got to we have to face this because we're going to be free by the end of the day. He was seen making that speech, and he was actually arrested by the paramilitary men. So in Venezuela, the civilian pro-government paramilitary groups that are armed and financed by the communist government, they're called collectives. So some members of the collectives arrested this guy. And how, oh my God, it's bad enough when the cops arrest you. And, at least in the board game rule book of the U.S. law system, technically, they've got the power to do that in this book. How annoying would it be when civilians have the power to arrest you because the government gave them special permission? Well, these civilian communist thugs arrested him. They brought him to the military police, and then the military police interrogated him and beat him. I've seen photos of this guy. He's not comfortable publishing those online, but I've seen photos of a big old bruise taking up a solid third of his face. And after that day, he lost 50% of the vision in his left eye. 50% of the vision gone. He was beaten by the military, all right? And these people were lured out into the streets by false opposition whose only exist to keep this communist regime in power, and we paid for his government.
We do pay for his government.
Oh my gosh. And there's so much.
Yeah.
There's so much that we were planning to talk about tonight that we haven't even had time to get to.
Including things like this.
Okay, so that's a good one. All right, so before Juan Guaido actually got to Colombia to go show up at the Live Aid concert and then bring the humanitarian aid back, he again lied to the Venezuelan people because all the Colombian media and the international media and Telemundo and Univision and Globovision, they were all trying to interview this guy. How did you get over here? The Maduro regime isn't letting you leave. And he says, well, the armed forces were part of this process, which that was meant to get people to believe people inside the military helped me. No, the people who actually got him across the Colombian border, some of whom he's pictured with, these two guys are bosses from a particular branch of a Colombian paramilitary group called Los Rastrojos. There's no real way to translate it, but the Rastrojos, they originally were tied to the right-wing paramilitaries, but more and more these days, they start doing business with independent drug traffickers or small-time communists. Anyway, they're bad guys. And again, just to clarify, cultivating and selling drugs is not what makes you a bad person. It's everything else that comes with drug trafficking, thanks in part to the war on drugs. So the kidnapping, the extortion, the rackets, making people disappear, the rapes, the human trafficking. The Rastrojos do all that too. They're the ones that got Juan Guaido to Colombia, right? It was not the military. It was these gangsters who got him there.
I just want to point this article out because I said it earlier and I just came across it again.
Oh my gosh.
So 2%, again, of all that money
just 2% of our tax money
2%.
actually made it to helping Venezuelans. The other 98% disappeared, totally freaking disappeared, and Guaido has not been able to open the books. And there's so many more events. I could tell you guys about the Cucutazo, when Guaido specifically appointed people who ended up stealing the funds for the billeting. So there's about between 700 and 1,000 Venezuelan soldiers who deserted from the Maduro regime. They crossed the border into Colombia, and like they had self-organized. And there was a particular hotel that the Venezuelan interim government told this hotel, all right, well, let our people stay there for a couple of months. We will pay you for it. Whatever the bill is. So there was money that was meant to foot the bill for what was going to be the spine of the Venezuelan Liberation Army. All right. So again, this is not CIA operations. This is the Venezuelan people getting ready to free themselves. I'll get there in a minute, Martha, I promise. And this guy appointed people, like there were people already on the commission. There were people with experience in doing this kinds of disbursements. Juan Guaido takes them off the commission. He names 2 of his friends to be in charge of that money. Those 2 friends stole all that money. And again, they spent it on nightclubs, hotel rooms, and cocaine and sex workers. And then all the Venezuelan soldiers who are going to be the spine of the Venezuelan Liberation Army, they turned homeless. The hotel couldn't afford to keep them anymore. They all got kicked out. Now, in the last 5 minutes of the show, we're going to get to what you can do to help protect the dignity and the integrity of what our Venezuelan brothers are trying to do. Because I'm going to tell you straight up, what do the Venezuelan people want? The overwhelming majority of Venezuelan people do not want elections with the regime that has been killing their people for 20 years. They want to make that regime fall. Well, how do they do it without any guns? Nicolae Ceausescu, Romania, look it up on Google, all right? That's what they want to do. This false opposition, they're doing the National Salvation Agreement, which means U.S. government, please give us money so that we can, continue to protect democracy and then do elections with this communist regime, who are actually the people that we're working for, not against. So what you can do, what any one of you guys can do, the Citizens Embassy of Venezuela published a list of 29 people in the U.S. government. These are specifically case officers in the State Department who are assigned to Venezuela or Latin America or the Western Hemisphere. And then the members of Congress who sit on the committees of foreign relations and the subcommittees that deal with Latin America. The 29 people on this list literally are the people in the U.S. government who collectively make U.S. policy to Venezuela. The Citizens Embassy has 5 demands that they want people to communicate to these folks. And it's got to be within the next couple of days, because on July 5th, Juan Guaido is going to have his little citizens assembly in Caracas, and he's going to take a selfie with the people inside of his own party who are still stupid enough to support him. And he's going to say, all right, U.S. government, the Venezuelan people support the National Salvation Agreement. Please give me more money so that we can go to elections with this communist regime who stole the last 7 elections. But hey, this time they're going to be honest, right? What you guys can do, we made on this list. We've got phone numbers so that you can call these people. You can call their Washington office. You can call their district office. We got both of them. If there are email addresses available for these people, you can email them. But almost every single one of these people has a profile on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, or on LinkedIn. You will find those links on that page, all right? Go there, contact these people directly, all right? We want to flood these people with thousands of phone calls and messages in the next couple of days. What are the 5 demands? One of them is the Venezuelan people say no to the National Salvation Agreement. Number 2, Juan Guaido does not represent the Venezuelan people as president. Now, mind you, these demands were drafted up by Venezuelans who had to leave their country because of communism, all right? Juan Guaido does not represent them. Number 3, they do not want more elections with the regime. They want the Cuban soldiers and the Russian soldiers out of Venezuela. Yes, both armies are still in Venezuela. And a lot of those people, especially in the Cuban army, are dressed in Venezuelan uniforms so that our intel agencies can't pick up on it, which, by the way, it is freaking hilarious to see all these really pale, blonde Russians trying to pass for Venezuelans. What is number 4? The Venezuelan people want to completely dismantle the one-party state. Completely, like they don't want to coexist. They don't want to leave that political party alive. They want to dismantle it the same way the Germans, well, the Allies, dismantled the National Socialist Party of Germany in 1945. And then number 5, the most important one, they want the U.S. government to stop funding Juan Guaido and just let the Venezuelan people take to the streets and free themselves once and for all. Now, for those of you who do not feel comfortable intervening in other countries' affairs, even as individuals, I understand that. But what you could at least do is contact those individuals and then demand, as a U.S. taxpayer, I do not want any of my money to go to finance Juan Guaido's fake government so he can give it to his people and to his supporters, his cronies, so that he can steal it from his people, so that his family can buy cocaine and go skiing in the Swiss Alps. And we don't want any of that, and we especially do not want we don't want our tax dollars stolen, just like that 98% of U.S. aid was stolen. It was gone, just disappeared. So if you don't have any personal connection to Venezuela, you don't feel comfortable making any demands about their internal policy, I understand that. I am not speaking on behalf of the U.S. government. I am speaking on behalf of my friends, my Venezuelan immigrant, refugee, exile friends in the Citizens Embassy of Venezuela. These are what these Venezuelans want. These are their demands. But what you can do as a U.S. taxpayer, contact these offices, call them, send them, bombard them with messages on social media and tell them, stop funding Guaido's government. And if you guys want to do that, if you can help us with that, because it's more easy than ever, it's easier than ever to send a message on social media. There's the URL right there on the screen. That is the website of the Citizens Embassy of Venezuela. The URL for the specific page is actually kind of long. So just look at the first part, http://embajadavenezolana.org. That's what you want to focus on. It means Venezuelan embassy. Embajadavenezolana.org, and just click news on the menu, and you'll see the release there in English and in Spanish. Phone calls for freedom. You guys can take part in this, all right? So one last time, if you don't want to make any comments about the internal policy of Venezuela, that's fine. But as U.S. taxpayers, if you have a problem with your money not only helping to keep a communist regime alive, but also most of that money being stolen by these good time SOBs who sold their people out to die of starvation or illness or murder under a communist regime, then call your congressman or call those congressmen on those lists and tell them, do not give Juan Guaido any more money. End of sermon.
And this is important because these Congress people are being influenced by the Juan Guaido
oh my gosh,
officials that came to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, so last week, Juan Guaido's people, they were in Washington, D.C. last week, meeting with congressmen, meeting with State Department people, and telling them, yes, the Venezuelan people really do support elections with the regime. Please give us more money. They were doing that last week. And we need you guys to make these phone calls within the next couple of days. This Friday, July 2nd, is the last day of the campaign. Why? Because we got July 4th weekend coming up, and then Venezuela's Independence Day is July 5th. On July 5th is when Juan Guaido is going to have his little citizens assembly with just the people from his party who support him, and he's going to take a selfie in front of a crowd of people, and he's going to send it to Ambassador James Story, and he's going to say, look, the people support this. Now we have to go to elections with the regime. We have to give the communists a fair shake. Please give us money to protect democracy in Venezuela. And it's wrong. It is so wrong. So we need you to counter that influence. We need to counter that lobbying. Protect the integrity of your tax dollars. Protect the integrity of my Venezuelan libertarian friends who are still trying to free their country from communism and without the help of the US Marines. Thank you very much. They're trying to do it on their own. So one more time, how do we expect an unarmed population to overthrow a communist dictatorship without guns? Again, Nicolae Ceausescu, Romania, 1989. Look it up. But in the meantime,
and also stop
funding Juan Guaido. Yes, this false opposition, who knows? If they were starved of money, they might actually try to do something real, but we know they're not going to, so that's okay. That's right. We just got to stop giving them money, all right? Oh my gosh, there's so many more stories.
On this list, and on this list, we have Ted Cruz, we have people like Marco Rubio, we have Maria Elvira Salazar, we have people that should know better that don't. So please contact them. Please contact them and let them know that you don't want our tax dollars to be going to funding this regime or any other regime. But this one in particular, let's focus for now.
And we know it's going to be some staff member or some intern answering the phone. Just make the phone calls anyway. Just make the phone calls. Please, folks. At least protect your tax dollars.
We're all on Twitter.
Protect your tax dollars from Juan Guaido.
Put it on Twitter if you can. Put it on any social media you can. Please help us. This is a really important time, and it's a time where libertarians can step up and make a real difference in the world without getting the government involved. So again, please, I urge you to go to embajadavenezolana.org and find this list of names here and help us get the word out. You have 2 days left to do this. So please and thank you. And with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. It was a lot of information. We didn't get to every single thing we wanted to get to, but we covered a whole lot. I've also posted some videos out there describing the situation. Again, if you want to share those, I would appreciate it. We do need to get as many people involved and spreading the word because this is important and we need to save these lives. And the Venezuelan people deserve better. So thank you all for watching.
Stop paying Juan Guaido to protect communism. Not okay.
Not okay. And as this Cubanita, I am very upset that this is happening and that I have to pay tax dollars to support this. So if not for us, for you, for the Venezuelan people, but let's get it done. Thanks again for watching. We appreciate it. Please like and share if you can. And we'll see you right back here next week with another episode of Latin Libertarians.
Peace.